Standing at my own front door with a key that wouldn't work, I realized she had no idea what she'd just triggered. Some victories are worth waiting years to achieve. The art of patient justice. At 42, I discovered that true power isn't about raising your voice or making threats. Sometimes, the most devastating response to betrayal is simply walking away with a smile, knowing that everything they think they've gained was built on foundations you control. What my wife didn't realize when she changed those locks was that she'd just triggered a sequence I'd spent years preparing for, never hoping I'd need to use it. I returned from a consulting assignment in Denver to find my key wouldn't turn. Standing there with my leather briefcase, watching the brass lock that had replaced our original, I felt an unexpected calm wash over me. 8 years of marriage, and Catherine had changed the locks while I was securing the Peterson account. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd just closed a deal that would net our firm over $2 million in fees, and my wife had locked me out of my own home. Her text arrived as I stood on our Italian marble doorstep. Found someone better. Don't bother trying to come in. I've moved on. The timestamp showed she was typing this while watching me through our security system, probably from the very couch I'd selected for our anniversary 3 years ago. I took a measured breath, typed back, "Are you absolutely certain about that?" and walked to my Audi without another glance at the house. The drive to the Ritz-Carlton downtown gave me time to process what I'd suspected for weeks. During our last video call, I'd noticed subtle changes in our living room. The arrangement we'd perfected over years of hosting dinner parties had been disrupted. Small details, but after 8 years of marriage to someone whose attention to aesthetics bordered on obsessive, you notice when the Hermes throw pillow disappears or when unfamiliar wine glasses appear on our bar cart. When I'd mentioned these observations, Catherine had laughed with that practiced lightness I'd learned to recognize. "Just refreshing things a bit, darling. You know how I get when you're away too long." But her Instagram stories had been telling a different story entirely, shots of our living space from angles she never used, times when she claimed to be at her yoga class, but the geolocation showed our home address. The first unmistakable warning had come during a call 3 nights earlier. Male laughter in the background, distinctive and definitely not from our sound system. I'd installed that Sonos setup myself, knew every acoustic quirk of our space. When I'd asked about it, Catherine's response was swift but not smooth. "Just watching something funny. You know how I am with those cooking shows." The call ended abruptly, citing a headache that materialized with convenient timing. 24 hours at the Ritz allowed me to reach out to Marcus, my college roommate who'd built his own investigation firm after leaving the FBI. Within hours, he'd assembled what I'd been too trusting to see clearly. Catherine had been involved with someone named Victor Castellanos, a business development director she'd met through her consulting work. The relationship had been developing for 6 weeks, but the interesting detail was Victor's pattern. Marcus had discovered 2 previous relationships with married women, both ending when he'd extracted what he needed from their professional connections. While Marcus briefed me on Victor's background, I accessed our shared digital accounts. Catherine had never been particularly tech-savvy, still used the passwords I'd helped her create when we'd organized our digital life together. The cloud storage revealed everything, photographs of them together in our home, dating back nearly 2 months. But in her rush to document this new chapter, she'd overlooked something crucial. My phone buzzed with another message from Catherine, taking this surprisingly well. No dramatic scenes or pleading. I suppose that confirms I made the right choice. I found myself smiling as I responded, "Give me 72 hours. Then we'll see who made the right choice." Her reply was immediate. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began composing emails to some very specific people. The foundation of Catherine's comfortable existence, the career she'd built, the connections she leveraged. I'd been instrumental in creating all of it. More importantly, I'd documented every step of the process. 5 years ago, when Catherine was struggling to establish herself in the consulting world, I hadn't just made introductions. I'd invested substantially through a holding company she'd never bothered to research thoroughly. She'd been so focused on the opportunity, so grateful for what seemed like a miraculous break, that she'd signed agreements without examining the fine print carefully. By midnight, I had everything organized for what would unfold over the next 3 days. Catherine's phone buzzed constantly as she tried to decipher my message about 72 hours. The beautiful part was that she had no idea the comfortable life she was now sharing with Victor. conducted on my furniture in my house, was built on agreements she'd forgotten she'd signed. The next morning brought the first phase into motion. I'd scheduled what Catherine would think was a routine board meeting, but I wasn't presenting concerns about expense reports or policy violations. I was exercising my shareholder voting rights as the silent partner behind Morrison Holdings, the investment firm that owned 18% of her consulting company. The expression on the board chairman's face when I identified myself was worth documenting. "You're the Morrison Holdings representative," he said, clearly recalculating several assumptions about our previous interactions. I nodded and placed a folder on the mahogany conference table. "I've become concerned about some recent decisions made by certain members of our executive team. Decisions that might require our immediate attention." While I sat in that meeting expressing my concerns about the company's direction and suggesting a comprehensive audit of executive expenses, my phone began vibrating with increasing frequency. Olivia, my former colleague who'd maintained friendships throughout the firm, was providing real-time updates. "Victor just left Catherine's office. His expression suggests their morning didn't go as planned. She's been on the phone for 20 minutes. The morning's revelation was that Victor had received his own surprise meeting with the legal team from his previous company. They'd become very interested in how certain confidential information had found its way to their competitors, information that aligned precisely with the timeline of his dinner meetings with Catherine. The conversations Marcus had recorded weren't just personal. They contained detailed discussions of upcoming deals, client strategies, and market positions that Catherine had shared based on information I'd mentioned casually over dinner. After exactly 53 minutes in the boardroom, I excused myself, having accomplished my objective. Word had already reached Catherine that her silent partner, the mysterious investor who controlled a significant portion of her company, was her soon-to-be ex-husband. The messages were arriving in rapid succession. "How long have you owned shares in my company? Why didn't you tell me about Morrison Holdings? We need to talk about this immediately. You're going to destroy everything I've worked for." I responded to only the last message. "You accomplished that yourself. Check your email." The email contained 2 attachments that would reshape her understanding of her situation. First, screenshots of her conversations with Victor discussing confidential client information, with timestamps showing these discussions occurred weeks before my Denver trip. Second, the partnership agreement she'd signed 5 years earlier, specifically the clause regarding ethical violations and their consequences for stock options and company benefits. The phone call from Rebecca, Catherine's sister, came next. "I can't stay quiet anymore," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Victor's done this before 3 times. He targets women like Catherine, uses their professional connections, then disappears when he's extracted what he needs." I already knew Victor's pattern, but Rebecca had details that even Marcus hadn't uncovered. "Last week, Catherine asked me to hold some documents," Rebecca continued. "Said they were just backup copies of work materials. I looked at them today. She's been moving substantial amounts of money around, disguising major purchases as routine business expenses. The documentation Rebecca provided showed that Catherine had been making significant acquisitions over the past month. Artwork, designer furniture, even a new Mercedes, all structured through her company expense account while using our joint accounts for down payments. The interesting detail was that she'd used the same expense account I'd helped her establish years earlier, the one where I remained listed as a financial advisor due to the complex setup required for her international consulting work. My response was calculated to demonstrate exactly how precarious her position had become. Had an enlightening discussion with the board about certain expense irregularities, particularly the ones from recent months. "The new furniture looks impressive, by the way. Original receipts would be helpful for the audit." Her response arrived within seconds. "What are you talking about?" Followed immediately by, "Those were legitimate business expenses." Victor's history with Richardson and Associates was quite revealing, I continued. 4 settlements in 3 years demonstrates a concerning pattern. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared repeatedly then. "We need to discuss this immediately." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded Rebecca's documentation to my attorney and drafted an email to the board detailing my concerns about financial irregularities. I didn't send it immediately. Sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one your opponent knows you possess, but haven't yet deployed. Marcus arrived at the hotel that evening with Chinese takeout and a revelation that elevated the situation beyond what even I had anticipated. "You won't believe what I discovered," he said, opening his laptop to display audio files. Victor's been recording his conversations with Catherine. Not just personal conversations, detailed discussions about client strategies, upcoming deals, everything. The recordings revealed that Victor wasn't acting independently. He'd been systematically collecting information from Catherine and providing it to Hartman and Associates, our firm's primary competitor. Every piece of valuable information Catherine had shared with him, believing she was helping secure their future together, had been carefully crafted misinformation that I'd been feeding into our conversations for months. While Catherine's messages escalated from confusion to panic to desperation, Victor's social media presence told its own story. His posts about their relationship had vanished, replaced by photos from what appeared to be a business trip to Chicago. The designer furniture she'd purchased to impress him, including that $60,000 sectional sofa she'd been so proud of in her photos, was suddenly listed for sale on several high-end consignment sites. The next morning brought the board's decision, delivered by the chairman himself. They weren't terminating Catherine immediately. That would create too much public attention. Instead, they were offering her a choice: resign quietly with a standard severance package, or face a comprehensive investigation into her conduct that would become public record. Either option would result in the immediate suspension of her stock options pending review, but resignation would allow her to maintain some professional dignity. There's one additional matter, the chairman added. Given the nature of these concerns and the involvement of Morrison Holdings, we'll need to review all personal assets acquired through company-supported loans or programs. Everything Catherine had accumulated during her rapid career advancement, our home, her car, even her designer wardrobe purchased through the company's executive shopping program, had been facilitated by financial arrangements I'd helped structure. The final revelation came when I accessed our home security system remotely. Catherine was in my study, frantically searching through files, clearly looking for documentation that might help her understand the scope of her situation. She'd found the wall safe behind our wedding photo from Tuscany, the one where I kept copies of every agreement, every investment record, every piece of evidence showing how I'd systematically built her career. She tried every combination she could imagine: our anniversary, her birthday, the day she made partner. Wrong, wrong, wrong. The correct combination was the date she'd signed the Morrison Holdings partnership agreement, the day she'd gained everything she was about to lose. My phone rang as I watched her give up on the safe and sink into my leather desk chair. The chairman again. We need to discuss the future direction of the company, particularly regarding the Morrison Holdings position. I glanced at the security feed one final time. Catherine sat surrounded by the evidence of a life she'd thought was hers, in a home she was about to lose, contemplating choices that would define her future. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I told the chairman, and I have some thoughts about restructuring our executive team. The meeting lasted 3 hours and concluded with my accepting a position on the board of directors, effective immediately. As the new director of strategic partnerships, I'd be overseeing all major client relationships and ensuring that information security protocols were properly maintained. The irony was perfect. Catherine's betrayal had created the opportunity for me to assume direct control over the very company she'd spent years trying to influence. During those 3 hours, my phone recorded 47 messages from Catherine, escalating from confusion to desperation to something approaching hysteria. Victor had apparently disappeared entirely, his phone going straight to voicemail, his apartment emptied according to building management. The final message arrived as I was reviewing my new office space, the corner office that had previously been Catherine's. "You planned this entire thing, didn't you?" It read. "Every conversation, every opportunity, every step of my career. You've been controlling all of it." I didn't respond immediately. Some realizations deserve time to fully develop. 3 weeks later, as I sit in my new office overlooking the city, that $60,000 sectional sofa occupies the space where Catherine's desk used to be. It serves as a daily reminder that the most effective justice isn't about destruction, it's about allowing people to destroy themselves while thinking they're winning. Catherine's final text to me was admirably direct. "I understand now. You didn't just help build my career, you designed it with a self-destruct sequence." She was partially correct. Every opportunity I'd created for her, every connection I'd facilitated, every financial structure I'd helped establish, it was all designed to be dismantled the moment trust was broken. The Peterson account I'd closed in Denver went through as planned. The company's valuation tripled overnight when the merger was finalized, the real merger, not the decoy information Victor and Catherine had tried to exploit. Catherine watched it all unfold from her parents' guest room in Connecticut, where she's been living since the board meeting concluded. Marcus asked me recently whether orchestrating such an elaborate contingency plan was excessive, whether spending years building structures that could be dismantled demonstrated a concerning level of distrust. I considered his question while looking at that sofa, remembering Catherine's pride when she'd made the purchase, her excitement about impressing Victor with her sophisticated taste. The truth is, I never planned any of this as revenge. I simply built our life with the understanding that trust, once broken, is irreparable. Every investment I made in Catherine's career, every door I opened, every opportunity I created, it was all genuine support designed to help her succeed. The contingencies weren't revenge mechanisms. They were simply practical protections for someone who understood that people change, circumstances evolve, and sometimes the person you marry isn't the person they become. The most valuable lesson I learned wasn't about planning or protection or even justice. It was about recognizing that true security comes from building something that can only exist with mutual respect and honesty. When those foundations crumble, everything built on them should crumble too. That's not revenge. That's just architecture. Sometimes the best response to someone who thinks they've found something better is simply letting them discover what they've actually found. Catherine thought she was trading up, choosing excitement over stability, passion over partnership. What she actually chose was temporary pleasure over permanent security, and a man who collected married women like trophies over one who had spent years treating her like a treasure. The designer sofa sits in my office now, barely used, a $160,000 reminder that the most expensive mistakes aren't always measured in money. Sometimes they're measured in the difference between what someone thought they wanted and what they actually needed. And sometimes, the sweetest justice is simply watching someone realize that their better choice was actually the end of everything they'd spent years building.